Welcome to the Cynical Developer Live. This is the podcast that helps you improve your development knowledge and career through explaining the latest and greatest in development technology, providing you with what you need to succeed as a developer. In this episode, we talk about pilots, prosthetics and programming with Cliff Agius. Cliff is a senior first officer with a major UK airline on one of its newest jets, the 787 Dreamliner. He had a passion for flying from an early age, where his drive, focus and determination was to become a pilot. He self-funded his pilot's licence and passed all the necessary exams for his first commercial flight with Air Arran, an Irish regional airline, where he flew ATRs from Dublin and Galway to island regions and into the UK. And after this, the jets got bigger, especially when he joined the major UK airline. When not flying plastic jets, he spends his time huddled over his laptop, thrashing the keyboard and working on his own projects from embedded systems to .NET, as he continues his work as a freelance developer. So welcome to the Cynical Developer, Cliff.
Welcome. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. I think we met, must be 2 years ago as of recording this now at NDC London.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, and it's I think you were you talking at that one? I can't remember now. I've seen that many talks by that many people that everything merges into one now.
Yeah, no, I was talking at that one. I've been lucky enough to talk at a couple of NDCs now, 2 at London and 1 in Oslo. So yeah, it's been good to talk because it means you get to go along to conferences for no money at all, which is excellent.
Yeah, definitely, especially the price tag of some of those conferences. And I self-funded last time, so yeah, I know how pricey that does get.
Yeah.
And so we met at that NDC, and we were talking about one of your projects, and it's just mind blowing. I think from my point of view, anyway, and it's what we're here to talk about today. But before we really get into that, I want to talk about your day job a little bit, because your day job's not coding.
No.
And some may argue that your day job is a little bit cooler than being a dev. How did you wind up writing code?
I left school and did an engineering apprenticeship with Ford Motor Company as electromechanical engineer. And as part of that, they taught us PLC programming, which is programmable logic controllers. So basically industrial computers and robot programming. So, left school at 16, went into that, did a 4-year apprenticeship and got taught to code by Ford Motor Company. Worked in the industry for 11 years, but always wanted to fly. Like you said in my bio, it's been a passion since I was a young kid. So I started doing my PPL, which is your private pilot's license, and then sort of thought, well, I could do this as a career. So I moved across to flying, and then I was sitting in a hotel. I want to say it's New York. I keep thinking back to this hotel room in New York. It'd been 2:00 in the morning. I had my laptop with me. I was hungry. There was nothing to do. And they keep saying that, the Big Apple, it never sleeps. But I can assure you that at 2:00 in the morning, there's not much going on. So I got my laptop out and started thrashing away at my keyboard and thinking to myself, what can I do? What can I do? And I was like, well, a friend at the time wanted me one of the website. And I said, well, I can do that. So I built her a website for her fitness company. And it kind of grew from there, really, and I kind of got back into it. Sadly, he's passed now, but I watched a lot of Scott Allen's recordings on .NET and MVC, and kind of got into .NET that way. And that's kind of grown. So that's some years ago now, but that's where I kind of got into coding. And I do it when I'm down route. We all kind of have our side gigs where we do it when the family are asleep at 2:00 in the morning at home. I do it when I'm in a hotel somewhere around the world. Don't need to, just close the doors and turn off the phone, and I can code away for hours. And the wife's not upset, the kids are not upset because I'm nowhere near them. So it kind of works for everyone, really.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit more exotic than anything I've done in the past. I have been abroad and coded, but not on a regular basis. And there's definitely some romanticism to what you said there.
Yeah, and the
Yeah,
other thing I do as well is I got a Surface Book laptop, the one that turns into like a tablet.
yeah,
The screen comes off. The reason I got that is because I use the screen. Now I have OneNote open, and the screen, and there's you got control yoke between your legs. There's a little table down to the right hand side on a
yeah,
787, and I'll have OneNote open and be flying along, and I'll have the pen, and I can think through a project that I'm working on or a problem I'm working on, and just write notes about the project. Because obviously flying the plane and looking around and making sure everything's interacting with the aircraft as you need to fly an aircraft. But when you're up in the cruise somewhere over middle Russia or halfway across Atlantic, you've kind of got time to just do stuff. That you have to interact with the aircraft and monitor everything. But if you got it down there, you can quickly look down, just make a note, and think about through a problem you're dealing with. Um, and what I find really therapeutic is you don't have Google, you don't have Stack Overflow, you don't have some Getter kind of forum or anything like this. It's just you and a pen. So you kind of think through how you want to design an API, how you want to put a project together, and it means you have to really stop and think through the problem and not just kind of quickly Google it. Yeah, that'll work, and use that. So I've done some of my best coding at 43,000 feet, trying to think at a mile an hour, without having a keyboard in front of me and without actually writing code. Um,
yeah,
so I know it sounds weird, but it just works. So
yeah.
what I'm
It's
basically saying is, if you're stuck with a problem, walk away from the computer.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And my history and my introduction to programming has just been blown to pieces because one of the stories I often tell is about sitting on the back of a bus, going to go and work in a high street retailer, and I had a notepad, and I sat and in VB6 on the back of this bus, I wrote an application. It was a little game. I never actually got round to building that game, and I wish I knew where that notebook was. But this was many, many years before Stack Overflow, and Google wasn't a thing either. So yeah, that bit of writing code without the help of the internet and stuff is really, really cool.
But the problem is, to do
Um,
it, you need to be really, really disconnected, because the draw to actually just quickly open a browser and quickly Google something or quickly look on Stack Overflow is quite
yeah,
powerful if it's there and it's available, but you're pretending it's not. But when it really isn't there, then you can't use it. You know.
yeah, yeah. That's definitely true, and that's something that I've noticed a little bit in myself, to be honest, of late. I've been working with some newer developers and some developers that have just come back into the industry, and that they're working through a problem. They've asked me to come and have a look at something. And I've gone, oh, do this, do that, do the other, and that's fixed that. Oh, but now we've got this issue. Oh, I'm not sure. Just Google that error
Yeah.
to see what it is straight away, rather than just sort of reading it and working it out. Just Google it. It'd be quicker to Google it. Google will tell me what the error is, and then we can fix it. Because I just Google it, look at the top answer. Oh yeah, I know what that is. Yeah, do
Yeah.
this, do that, do the other. Just takes a little bit of thinking out of it, making me a lazy developer maybe.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's lazy. It's just it's being productive, isn't it? If it's
Yeah,
if it jogs your memory as, oh yeah, that's what I need to do. Yeah, I remember now. I did this a year ago. We're human. We can't remember everything. It's
yeah,
impossible. Which is why Google and Stack Overflow, any good developer is on it 3 or 4 times a day, aren't they? At least just looking at things and, oh yeah, that's how you do it. I remember now. Yeah, okay, let's do that. And don't cut and paste. Just write it in your own way. But your English teacher would be upset when you cut and paste your homework, wouldn't she? So it just treat it the same way as what I do. But when you're completely disconnected, yeah, it is. It's I find it very therapeutic to think through a problem. So, and it keeps me awake on those dark nights coming back across the Atlantic, where it's 3 in the morning. You desperately want to fall asleep, but you need to stay awake and keep an eye on the plane. It's a way of staying awake as well, because your mind is active thinking through something, so it's not going to fall asleep if it's active.
yeah, yeah. I was reading an article today actually. Well, it wasn't an article; it was a Twitter thread, and it was actually about copying and pasting from Stack Overflow, and it was to do with Docker, and I think it's the Razor graphics drivers. or the application that you interact with for the Razor graphic drivers. And it's an old bug, and it's since been fixed. But there was an issue where both Docker for Windows and this graphics application wanted to make themselves the only instance of themselves to run.
I read this earlier,
And
actually. Yeah,
yeah, and they copied the code to get the GUID for the assembly from Stack Overflow, and the code was wrong, and it was getting the GUID of the .NET assembly
yeah.
rather than the actual application. And that is for everybody out there, is make sure you check the code that you're copying and pasting, especially if you're getting paid for writing it.
Yeah, well, yeah, that as well. But also, doesn't Stack Overflow have like in its rules that if you cut and paste anything, then they own that bit of code, which means they technically then own a bit of your code base. So
Yeah,
if that's the case, do not Microsoft and Razer then kind of owe kind of Stack Overflow a bunch of money? I don't know.
yeah, I don't know, I know there
That's
was
what I
definitely something
thought
that
when I looked at it, and I was like, oh, hold on.
yeah, yeah. I know there was definitely some change in the legislation where if you did take any code from Stack Overflow, that you're supposed to comment and attribute it back to the post in Stack Overflow that you got it from.
But if they're closed
Um,
sourced, how do you do that?
yeah, yeah, exactly. You probably can't.
Yeah,
Um, but I think this actual bug, I think, was a long time before that rule came in anyway.
yeah,
But there's a few things like that. I know somebody who worked for a company who said, and their company had said, we don't use open source software. We use only closed source software so that you're protected from any problems, which is laughable anyway.
yeah,
But then the software that they wrote was in .NET, and as we all know that now, .NET is open source. So
yeah.
I'm not sure how they can put that
I had
into
exactly
practice, really.
with a client a few months ago that said the same. They didn't want to use open source, but they wanted it all written in .NET. I just opened up the web browser and just said, "Look, it's open source. It's on GitHub. You can. It is." Well, no, it's owned by Microsoft. I was like, no, it's open source. It really,
Yeah,
really is. Um,
yeah,
so they're like, oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, it's a case of yeah, sometimes the client doesn't know kind of what they're asking for. So
yeah, yeah. So one of the things that you touched on earlier was the fact that you're sat driving a plane, if that's the right term,
flying, yeah,
flying. Yeah,
flying,
there we go.
yeah.
Flying a plane at 50 odd thousand feet, and you're writing code. Now, I keep getting told that aeroplanes pretty much fly themselves. I think you've just proved that point now.
Well, they do. If I was to describe my job, and sometimes we're asked to, we're basically a systems operator now. So the bit of flying where we're physically flying the plane is probably the first and the last 10 minutes of actually physically handling and controlling the plane. So the takeoff and the landing. The bit in the middle, when the autopilot's engaged, we just operate the system. So we're basically asking the computer nicely, we need to go over here. We need to follow that route. Air traffic control have told us to do this, so this is what we now need you to do. Change the flight plan in the computer, hit execute, and it flies the plan. Um, but equally, we need to interact with the aircraft, make sure that we do fuel checks and route checks, make sure that the plane is where it thinks it is, where we need it to be, and the fact that the fuel on board is enough to get us to destination, plus a bit to get us to an alternate if need be. Looking out the window and looking at the weather radar, make sure we're not about to fly through a massive thunderstorm. So, there's all these ideas of automating and getting rid of the pilots, but I think it'll be a long time before that happens, because there's quite a few times that you're there and you make sure that the plane doesn't fly through a thunderstorm, or something goes wrong and you need to sit there and think through the problem and work it out such that you get to the destination and nobody knows that you've had a problem en route, but you spent half hour dealing with a fairly serious problem. But the training kicks in, you deal with it, and you move on. So we're not going to be kicked out of flight deck anytime soon. I'm pretty certain of that. Not in my career, I hope.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It that sort of software is something that I'd never want to work on. I know a guy who he wrote some Horizon software for fighter jets of some description,
Hmm.
and he said that some of the complications that you get through that came out through his testing was frightening. So the first iteration, it kept the horizon perfect. As soon as you hit the pole where it flipped, in the simulations, the aeroplanes just nosedive straight into the ground.
Yeah.
It's like, right, yeah, that's not something I'd ever want to do.
No.
I don't want to be writing that sort of thing.
I mean, I know how they've done it for the 787. They've taken three separate processors from three different manufacturers. So, say Intel and I don't know, I can't think of any other chip manufacturers now, but I can't think of any. Can you think of any? Um, what would it be? Intel. Texas Instruments is another one. I can't remember the third. But they take these three chip manufacturers, so three separate chips that have the same input outputs, and then they get three different teams writing in three different languages against those three different chips, so that there's no chance of there being a hardware and software bug in any of the three autopilot systems.
Right.
And
Sure.
that's the way, so the spec says that if you see this input, this is what we want the output to happen. But the
Yeah.
code that does that and the hardware that does that is from different teams. So the way you come about, solving that problem will be different across the teams. And that means that, your solution may have a bug, but the other team shouldn't. And the idea being is that all three computers need to agree on an output before that is actioned by the flight control systems. So
Yeah.
hopefully, with your friend that flew into the pole on the grounds, his computer would have been no, and the other two computers would have said no, we stay straight and level,
Yeah.
and then those two would outvote the other one, and the plane would fly straight and level. So
Cool.
that's
Yeah.
kind of how it's meant to work. But as we've seen with some instances with the 737 Max, it's they need to make sure that the spec is written correctly.
Yeah. So, do you fly passenger planes? Is it, or is it cargo?
No, it's all
I'm
passengers or self-loading freight. It's all passengers. We have lots of cargo on board, obviously, as well. But yes, it's passengers around the world.
cool.
Uh,
So, the big sort of topic that we're here to talk about, even though we spent the last 15 minutes or so talking about planes, is the prosthetics. But to stay on the aeroplanes for a little bit longer, have you ever at Halloween taken one of your prosthetics onto an aeroplane and made it crawl up the middle of the aeroplane
you know
like
what?
something from the Addams Family?
You know what? No, I haven't. But that's a good idea.
Just middle of the flight.
Yeah, it's
Just
a
don't
good
tell
idea. Middle of the
anybody.
night when everyone's sleeping. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Might be career limiting, but it'd be funny.
Yeah. Yeah. It'd be something you maybe have to do on your last day.
Yeah. So. No,
Cool.
I have a plan for my last day of flying is because obviously we go through security quite often.
Yep.
You as a passenger might kind of think, it's just security. I'll get by with it. For us crew, it drives us nuts because every different country has different rules, regulations. Some
Yep.
want your laptop out, some don't. Some want this out, some don't. Some want your liquids in certain bottles, and the bag's got to be clear. So you travel the world and like you get to security and you look like an idiot because you don't know what they want. But it's because you go to so many different countries where the rules are different. So my
Yeah.
last day flying, I will go for security completely naked with nothing on me. Make sure that there's like, I comply with your rules. There is nothing you're gonna find here. That is my plan when I'm 65 and going. So I'll be wrinkly and old, but that is my plan.
Nice. Yeah. As a passenger, it is frustrating. I when I flew out to Amsterdam to a conference, I had all my podcast audio equipment with me, and flying out of Manchester, I got all the equipment out, put it all down, went through the scanner, no problem. Coming back from Amsterdam, I got all the equipment out, and the guy was like, "No, put it all back." So I spent another 5-10 minutes putting it all back in the boxes for it to go through the scanner to go to the other side. And he went, "What's in all these boxes?" And I'm like, "You've just seen me take it all out. Then you saw me put it all back in, and now you're asking me what's in there. I've told you, and you saw it."
Yeah.
That was frustrating, and that was once. That wasn't daily or multiple times a day. So
So,
yeah, I can
well,
understand your frustration.
working on the prosthetic arm, there's obviously some electronics in there that I've used from Adafruit, some little boards, and
Yep.
I travelled the world for a few weeks and took them with me, and I got weird looks when I come back from the US And I had one of the boards. Thankfully, they're cheap, but one of the boards confiscated coming through Indian um, security. So
Right.
it was in my um, whole bag, but they said you're not allowed electronics in your whole bag. So I took out my whole bag, put it in my flight bag. Now I'm in full uniform. I'm
Yeah.
about to get on board a $250 million jet and fly it halfway around the world. But yeah, this little bit of electronics, because they didn't know what it was, they confiscated it. And I was like, wow. I don't want the flight to be late because I'll get into trouble with the boss. So I let them take the little electronic board, which I don't know what they did with it. I dare say they chucked it in the bin. But yeah, thankfully my code was on GitHub, so they weren't stealing the code; they were just stealing the board.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
That's a mistake you'd only ever make once, wouldn't it?
yeah,
Flicking the
yeah,
code on the board.
I've got it working, brilliant. Oh no, they've stolen it. Yeah, yeah.
So we mentioned it a couple of times there, was the prosthetics. How did you come to start building prosthetics? Is that because you've got that engineering background?
Well, I mean, I do have the engineering background. As I said before, I worked for a full motor company and it taught me robotics and programming. So I know a bit about robotics. Prosthetics is basically a robot that you wear. Um, but it all started back in December 2016. There was a story on BBC News and Sky News here in the UK that was about a dad that built his daughter a prosthetic arm. He 3D printed this arm for his daughter. Um, and our friends Sharon and Paul, they have a son called Caden, who goes to school with my two kids, and he's got no left arm, so he's got a little bit of a stump from his left elbow, but his left forearm and hand don't exist, and that's how he's born. It's a birth defect. So Sharon come to school that morning while I was doing the school drop off, and she said, "Oh, Cliffy, you seen the news? The thing about the dad 3D printed arm." I was like, "Oh, I have, Sharon. Yeah, I have, Sharon." Instantly knowing that the reason she was asking me is because the next thing, you have a 3D printer, don't you, Cliff? Yes, yes, Sharon, I do. So that's how it started. So I went away after that, I thought to myself, well, I can help. I know how to 3D print. It can't be that hard to find these plans and 3D print an arm. And that's pretty much how we started back in December 2016, January 2017. And I've been working on the project ever since. It's been my side project. It's been fun. But yeah, that's where it all started back then.
All right. So you 3D print all your own parts?
Yes, I have a 3D printer. At the time, I had a Rat Mendel Pro, which is made out of threaded bar and 3D printed parts, and you need to have one to print one to make one.
Yeah.
It kind of so I sort of bought the 3D printed parts off eBay, made my printer, and then printed a spare set of parts myself. But when I started 3D printing the parts for Caden's arm, it got to a point where my old Mendel printer was tired and worn out and couldn't quite cope. So I now have a Prusa Mark III printer, which is absolutely phenomenally good. It really is good, and I think I paid 800 when I got it and it was new. They're now around 600. But they've got
Yeah.
a mini version, which is a slightly smaller build volume, and that's only €300. And that will be
All
able
right.
to print every single part of the hands and arm that I'm building at the moment. So for €300, you can buy a 3D printer that can print everything that I've done.
Nice, nice. That makes it a lot more affordable than some
Yeah,
of the commercial options out there at the moment.
yeah, yeah. So, and I mean,
Uh,
if you can possibly think of it, someone's probably already designed it. You go to a website like Thingiverse, there's thousands and thousands of parts for things like cookers and washing machines, or you want something to hold your iPhone at a certain angle, there'll be someone that's already designed it and put it up there. It's like
yeah,
Thingiverse is like GitHub for 3D printing.
yeah,
If you can think of it, it's already there, and you can download it and print it, and and modify it and change it and put it back again.
yeah, yeah. It's something I've been playing with or toying with the idea of getting one, but every time I go, yeah, I'll get one, I look and I go, well, I need to spend a little bit more money. The resolution's not quite good enough. I'll wait a bit longer. I'll wait a bit longer, and just never got around to doing it.
Yeah, the Prusa Mini is basically a slightly smaller version of my i3, and the resolution is absolutely phenomenal. It's really really good. Literally, I can click print and walk away from the printer and know full well that I'm going to come back and find a part that's built as I asked it to be built. So it
Yeah.
is that good. So well worth the money.
Sure. So does that print from a coil of plastic?
Yeah, it prints from a spool of plastic in different materials. So you got PLA, ABS. ABS is like Lego. PLA is like a vegetable extract. A polylactic acid, I think it stands for. No, that's the stuff that. No, that's right. I think. Um, and it basically it's a spool of filament you feed in whatever color you buy, and it melts it at 200 degrees there or thereabouts, and basically it's like an old dot matrix printer. It goes along
Yeah.
and kind of draws it, and then it moves on the z-axis by zero point 0.2 0.15 millimeter, depending on the resolution you want it to be. So I typically print in 0.2 millimeter layers, and it will move up by 0.2 millimeter, and then print the next layer again, and it builds up over a few hours, so you end up with a 3D part.
Nice.
It's literally
Nice.
that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, it is impressive. I think the stuff that I was looking at printing would have been from ABS because I needed it for the rigidity and the strength and that because it would have been for parts like airsoft parts and things like that
Yeah,
for my rifles and stuff like that.
yeah. So well,
So
you can also use as another material called pt.1, which is really tough. But it's also got a little bit of give and flexibility to it as well,
oh, right,
which is
okay,
kind of cool. But if you design it right, it won't have that. It won't be flexible, but it'll be super tough. I've printed gears that have gone into a gearbox out of PETG, and yeah, they were
oh
better
no,
than the parts that come from the manufacturer of the go
yeah,
kart
yeah,
I was repairing for my son.
cool.
So yeah,
So you don't have to like polish the plastic afterwards with oh, nail polish remover. I can't remember what it's called.
acetone.
Acetone.
Yeah, acetone.
Yeah.
No, it's that good that you don't need to. I mean, you can
Oh,
if you wish, but it's my old printer. I used to have to either sand it down with a bit of wet and dry, or use some
yep.
acetone and rub it over the top to make it smooth. But my Prusa printers, the quality is that good that you don't need to. It literally comes off the build plate and
Nice.
it's ready to use straight away. I
Yeah,
use it a
yeah.
lot in my when I'm doing IoT projects for clients, like embedded systems and things. I tend to print like a box or a housing for it to be in. I did a project that was going to be used in golf clubs, and it needed a box, so I 3D printed half the box, paused the printer, dropped the electronics in, carried on printing, and finished the box off. So it's
Oh,
hermetic,
nice.
still in there with the battery and everything. Knowing full well that the battery was going to last the couple of months, but I only needed it for a few days, so that it was it could be sopping wet and horrible on the golf course, but it didn't matter because it was all protected inside.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's really good. That's really good. I like that. I think the best one that I've seen, sort of printer wise, is the one that uses powder and lasers,
Yeah,
um, because when the videos are sped up, it just looks futuristic. The way that the models and things appear out of the pile of powder.
yeah, they're really good, but they're also really expensive. They're
Yeah, yeah, they
the
are.
laser sintering ones that are super expensive, but also their build volumes are quite small on the ones that you and I can afford without having
Yeah,
to spend like tens of thousands of dollars. You can get them for a few thousand, but the build volumes you'd be struggling to print a case for your iPhone kind of thing. They're that small.
yeah, yeah.
Whereas the FDM printers, the ones that melt the plastic, are I mean, my printer can print 250 mil by 250 mil, but I think it's 280 high. So
All
it's
right.
quite a
Okay.
big build volume, and
Yeah.
you get quite clever at building two parts and gluing them together, and then just sanding down the glue gap, so you can print. You know, there's a guy that 3D print. I think it was Aston Martin. Printed all the parts and basically built himself an Aston Martin body shell that he put onto his old. I think it was a Corvette or something. Like that. It's an American guy. You can
Yeah.
it's hilarious, but it does look like an Aston Martin. He's
Nice.
I don't know how long he spent printing it, but days.
Yeah. For the cost of the plastic, you could have probably bought an Aston Martin.
No, you say that, but on this prosthetic arm, I can print the arm, the hands, the socket that connects the cadence, and it comes to £5.
Oh, nice.
All the parts. If you go to my blog or you go to
Yeah.
my GitHub, you can download it from GitHub, all the designs, and you can print everything. And it comes to I think it's like £4.80 or something like this.
Oh,
One spool of plastic, which costs £28, can print 4 hands, complete hands.
oh, right,
So,
okay.
or 2 complete hands with arm and socket. So we're talking seriously cheap money. The idea behind this project was for Caden, but I've moved it on since to actually now we kind of almost got it kind of working with Caden. Is to be able to take a Prusa mini printer, which is €300, like I said, a couple of
Yeah,
spools of plastic, the electronics, the screws, the bolts, springs, all the other bits, put them in a box. And going back to my day job of flying, is take that box to somewhere around the world where there's not kind of the NHS as we have here in the UK.
yeah,
Take it to a local hospital unit and say, right, this is how you 3D print a hand, an arm for that little child over there. Teach them, show them, be at the end of an email or a Skype call, and help them build them for the community. And because they'll have the
yeah,
printer and a couple of spools of filament, they can then print 3 or 4 arms, and we can send some more filament at like 30 sort of pound a spool, and they can print and make them for the community, for the other children that are there. That
yeah, yeah.
it started off with Caden, but actually realizing that we can get the price down to less than £500 for a prosthetic arm. It's becoming a point where actually it's feasible to do this.
Yeah, it is truly amazing. It's truly inspiring as well. It definitely beats the socks off of us developers that take stuff from a database, do something to it, put it back. You know,
I,
you're actually making a difference in the world.
yeah, those things. You look at a humanitarian toolbox. That's kind of what they're
Yeah,
doing, but they're also helping the Red Cross kind of save lives as well. So it
sure.
depends on the project, doesn't it? At the end of the day, there's a value
Yeah,
to everything
yeah,
we do.
definitely, definitely. So because these the prosthetics that you're manufacturing, um, they're sort of related to healthcare and all that sort of thing. Is there any legislation around the stuff that you're doing, or are you just free to do whatever you like?
Right. Well, this is quite an interesting question, actually. The way I started the project when I started back in 2016 was finding an arm that worked similar to what Caden has at the moment. So the NHS provide Caden with a fiberglass arm and hook on the end of that arm, and then there's
Yeah,
a cable that goes from the hook up the arm across his shoulders to his other shoulder on his right shoulder because he's missing his left forearm, and then he moves that right shoulder backwards and forwards and opens and closes the hook. So it's completely mechanical. There's no electronics, nothing else. And every year he goes back to Roehampton Hospital, and they kind of measure him again, take a cast, and make a new arm. But he keeps the same hook, the same cable, and then he gets a new arm made out of fiberglass, and off he goes. So the early designs that are 3D printed were basically copies of that, but 3D printed. Um,
yeah,
and then it moved on from there, and it was never quite right. And Caden wasn't keen on it. He preferred his hook because he had a bit more control and dexterity. But he'd been using it, since he could basically crawl. So he had all that kind of the human body is amazing. That if you take away a sense, you build it up using your other senses, and he had
yeah,
done that
yeah,
over time. So I started going through designs, and I stumbled across a project called Open Bionics, and it's a team down in Bristol way in the UK that have basically designed a 3D hand, and it is literally just a hand at the time. And the early one was called Ada, and then the second one was called Brunel. And it was all on GitHub. It was all open source. It was all on the Creative Commons license that you could download and use. And that's what I did. And the hand that I'm building now is based on the Brunel. There's been some heavy modifications done by my eldest son, Macaulay. He's a dab hand with the 3D design stuff, far better than I am anyway. So he's taken the bits and we've worked together. I've used my engineering skills to say, actually, we need to change it this way and that way. And that's where we've come about the an arm we have at the moment. But back in 2017, Open Bionics basically stopped taking PRs onto the GitHub. It's still there. You can still go and find it and download it. But it all went quiet. They effectively disappeared. The projects, there's no one from the team helping. And at first, there was myself and some people that were sort of chatting about the projects on forums and on the GitHub. repo and doing PRs. We were all really angry at Open Barnex. And then I realised afterwards, after a bit of time looking back at it, that actually it wasn't the fact that they had just basically like taken the ideas from the community and gone and made this, turn themselves into a company as they are now. It's the fact that they needed to comply with the regulations. So if you think about NICE, National Institute of Clinical Excellence in the UK, which is basically the board that decides what the NHS can and can't give. So decide if you're allowed to have that cancer tablet or if it's too expensive. Decide if you're allowed to have
Yeah.
a prosthetic arm or it's too expensive. To get NICE approval for their arm, it wasn't allowed to be open source. It had to be closed source. So they had to step away from the open source projects and make their own closed source and iterate on their design internally. And they built a company about it. And there's been a few children, and I think it was last week, a soldier that got injured with a 41mm shell from a mortar, lost his arm in Afghanistan. He's now been fitted with one of they now call it a hero arm. He's he is a true hero, but that's what
Yeah.
they call their arm anyway. He got one of those last week, and you can see how it's changed his life, and you can see how it's changed the lives of like Tilly, who's their kind of poster child, who had one of their early designs. And you can see where they're moving along. So the NHS is now doing some test cases. You can see where they're moving along that kind of trajectory to have these available on the NHS. But they're still, because it's now being approved by the NHS, they have to have all the certification. It's still really, really expensive. And this is in the UK where we have the NHS that will help fund these things. You can go along and buy a hero arm direct from Open Barnex, and people have done that. They've crowdsourced and crowdfunded, but they're expensive. I managed to speak to one person about it, and all they told me was it was slightly over £10,000. So
Yeah.
it's not cheap.
No.
But if it literally costs an arm. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's it's not cheap, but you can see because they've put all this effort in, they're a business at the end of the day. They need to make money. They need to pay the staff. They need to pay the overheads. And they need to pay for the certification of their products. I totally get that and I accept that now, But early on when I was working on the project, it was like, they've taken this, they've closed sourced it, and I was quite angry, as I say, some people I know in Brazil were as well. But the GitHub was still there, so I forked it. I've iterated the design. We've designed our own arm and socket so that it fits Caden. We changed parts of the hand so that it works better for the electronics we're fitting. And that's kind of how we've kind of gone about it. But
Sure.
yeah, if it needed to be provided by NHS or a medical board wherever it is around the world, then obviously it would need some legislation to make sure it's compliant. But if you're buying a 3D printer and printing it yourself for your own child or for yourself, then it's it's your own thing. Look
Yeah. Yeah.
at Scott Hanselman. He keeps himself alive day in day out using a crowdsourced kind of pancreatic, not what's it called?
Insulin pump.
Insulin pump. That's it. You watch his talk. He gives about his insulin pump and about how he's gone about kind of biohacking, as he calls it. His insulin pump. It's the same sort of thing. There's all these rules and regulations, but he's had to do it to make his life, better. And
Yeah.
that's the idea behind this project.
Yeah. Yeah. It is fantastic. You're talking about £500 for an arm, and kids grow really quickly. So it's £500 now, and in a few months' time, it's £500 then, and in a few, probably £500 again. But which some people might go, that's a lot of money. But then if it's £10,000 or more an arm,
Yeah.
it's that's an insane amount of money then.
Yeah. So I mean, the socket, the bit that actually connects the arm to Caden, that part costs 80p to print, or 78p is the exact amount
Yep.
to print. It takes about 6 hours, so you've got 6 hours worth of a little bit of electricity that the printer uses. So call it £1.
Sure.
In plastic and electricity to print this arm or print the socket, and the socket
Yep.
fits onto the arm, which holds the hand. So when he grows, as he does, and he's 15 years old now, we just print a new part and off he goes again.
Sure.
He comes around and says, and all I do is go into the software and say, make it 5% bigger, click print,
Yeah.
and off it goes.
Yeah. Job done.
Gets it done,
Yeah.
wait 6 hours. I normally do it in the evening, wake up in the morning, it's there printed, and I can drop it around during the day and make sure it's fitted. So
Cool.
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I guess he gets his own choice of colours, does he? And
Yeah, he does.
things like that.
There's quite an interesting story actually. I originally decided that I was going to print it and started using kind of flesh tone, pastel kind of colours on the first early designs, and tried white and spraying it as well
Yep.
in a pastel colour. Caden hated it, and it's like, well, why is that? What's wrong? And the good thing is that he's from the very beginning, he's been very frank and honest about his feedback, which is fantastic. I mean, it's kind of what I'm used to from the airline industry is the fact that if you give frank, honest feedback in such a way that you don't feel threatened by the feedback, you can take it on board and learn from it. Whereas if you feel, threatened by, someone's giving you feedback and you're not used to it, then you're going to think, well, they're berating me and making me feel bad. But at work, every time we land the plane and taxi understand shut the engines down, we give each other feedback. So I'm so used to it. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. You could have done that better, that sort of thing. So he gave honest feedback and said, "I don't like it, I hate it. I don't want it skin colours." And it's like, well, why is that? He said, well, because people then look across and it's like, is that real or is that fake? I don't know, can't tell, and they start to stare. And he says, whereas if it's a completely different colour, it's obvious that it's not real, and it's obvious that it's fake, and it's obvious that it's prosthetic. So I literally gave him the website to the supplier that I use for my filament, and said, "Fill your boots. Tell me what colour you want." He picked a black that's got this kind of. It's called Galaxy Black. It's black with white speckles in it, silver speckles. And then for the flexible material, which is effectively the ligaments between the fingers, he picked a bright, luminous green that glows in the dark. It's black and glow in the dark green. And it does. It looks fantastic. It really does. But yeah, he's over the moon with that. And, he's showing all his school friends and they're like, wow, that looks so cool. So kind of, I've forgotten the what's his name? The superhero, the Marvel hero. Iron Man, that's it. Thank you. Yeah, so Iron Man. It's and that's what he likes. So he's got people. Oh yeah, look at this. Wow, this is so cool. But yeah.
There was so much good content in this talk with Clifford today that I've had to split it down into 2 episodes. So this is the end of part 1. Hopefully you will join us next episode for part 2. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, then drop us an email, a tweet, or leave a comment on the website where you can find all the resource links, show notes for each episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is, and help The Cynical Developer to reach more developers around the globe.